welcome back. You guys are going to love today's podcast, today's show. I have got yet again the fabulous Daniel. I'm just going to call him Daniel D. We've had Daniel on once before. He is the fabulous auctioneer at Ray White Commercial on the south side in Rochdale. And Daniel shared some really hot tips with us and some good auctioneer's secrets a couple of weeks back. And I've asked him to come on board and speak to us a little bit more about auctions and auctioneers. So, Daniel, welcome back to the show, my mate.
Thank you, Mish. You're really good for my ego. All the compliments are amazing.
Well, if you weren't it, I wouldn't be saying it. Really well done. And guys, I just want to tell you that Daniel was just telling me now, out of the how many auction you've just done a cracker week of auctions. You had 30 auctions recently and you sold 25 of those, hey?
Yeah, so 25 out of 30, I think works out to be about 83% clearance, which is kind of above the Brisbane average, what we're seeing, which is fantastic. Registrations are coming in for properties thick and fast. I think we're up to about 5.2 average registered bidders per auction. Clearly evident that the supply is very low and demand is higher than it's ever been, and that's thanks to a recent reduction as far as finance. So yeah, there's a little bit of confidence out there at the moment. Buyers are now fearing that they're going to start paying more and more as the weeks go on. So there's a bit of a frenzied approach on properties at the moment. So which is exciting for me because I get to have big crowds again, and my job is much easier when there's a lot of interest on a property. So yeah, it's good fun.
Absolutely. It's the drama and the fun. But I'm really pleased you mentioned that because this show is all about educating people about getting into auctions, people and there's that huge black cloud over auction. So many people are scared of auction and what we try and do over here is demystify what that fear is. So we're going to be asking quite a lot of, I think, sticky questions. We're going to be demystifying finance and the auctioneer's role. And if you missed it last time, we went through segment one, two, and three, which was the ideal audience, which is you guys and what you need to know and what you should have and the questions you should ask when going to an auction. We also spoke about the 10-point checklist. So that's all in the previous show notes. And what Daniel, as the auctioneer, is looking for in the audience when you come on board. So, with that said, Daniel, let's just dive straight into it and let's talk about the myths around finance and what buyers should know. So there's a big myth that only cash buyers can buy at auction. Now, I know that's through conversations, that's not 100% sure true. So the big myth out there is winning a bid, and if you can't come up with the money on the day, do you lose the auction? What happens, and how does that work?
Okay, well, there's a little bit of a misunderstanding around this. I guess on the day of the auction, you don't have to bring a suitcase full of cash or transfer the entire purchase price. What you pay on the spot is usually just a deposit, which in Queensland is most often around 10% of the purchase price. So assuming it's $1 million, you'll need $100,000 as a down payment. Or there's an option to do 5% as well, all depending on, the vendor's terms. But and I think this is the crucial part. I guess from the moment the hammer falls, you are legally bound to the contract. There are no finance clauses. There's no subject to building inspection clauses or no cooling off periods. If your bank finance happens to fall through after the fact, which would be a shame, and it never really happens, you'll be in breach of the contract. So it's important you have some pre-approvals in place, know your limits, especially if your bank and lender or broker has said that you can go up to $1 million, don't go to 1.1 or 1.2. I guess this is where you can get into a bit of hot water and a bit of trouble.
Mm, mm.
And no one wants to lose their deposit if they've gone and stretched above their means. And let me tell you, that's not a position anybody wants to find themselves in. And we don't like this position for them to be in. It can mean losing their deposit, facing legal costs, and even being liable for damages if the property, wrestles less than what you agreed to pay. So prepare, prepare, prepare.
Yes. Have you had any instances where people have bid for the property and they've got their 10%, they pay their 10%, and then they have snags with paying the balance, that they haven't got the balance on tap or within 30 days. Now, I'm always led to believe that, you can always negotiate yourself in and out of situations. So have you had instances where something like that's happened and the vendors allowed them a number of days or time to find that finance? What can you tell us about that?
Mish, when you sell a property, there's obviously some time constraints, especially if you're taking a property to auction. You as a vendor are going to want this property sold. Sometimes it's not a matter of price; it's a matter of a process for the particular seller. So they may have time constraints to be able to settle what they that they may have had a purchase that's lined up and then hinging on this sale to happen. So if a buyer rolls up and has purchased the property at auction, and then on the 11th hour, the finance falls through because sometimes, they can get into some extreme situations where, they've lost their job or, a change of heart. Then this is where I guess the solicitors have to get involved to be able to work on something amicably.
Mm.
Some vendors are really reliant on sale proceeds to be able to tip their money into a new venture. So sometimes you could be like a three-way tango where there's so many, prongs to a transaction. And if on the 11th hour finance falls through from the buyer, it can be very, very tricky. And this is something that obviously I don't really get involved in too much. And this is a legal matter. But we do find some things that happen. I had an example a couple of years ago in Melbourne where the buyer had bought a property at auction, paid a 10% deposit, everything was all hunky dory. And then, come 5 days prior to auction, the poor bugger lost his job. So, income was not supported anymore. And this is where, you know,
That's ouch.
it's
So had
it's
he
very sad.
had he already gone to auction? So he had already gone to auction and he was on contract.
Was on contract, went to
Yeah.
auction 5 days before the settlement. Buyer found out that he's no longer working. He got made redundant. There wasn't a payout or anything in the pipeline, so he couldn't complete the purchase. In fact, he had to walk away from his 10% deposit in the end. Now,
Wow. Ouch.
the vendor obviously receives that deposit,
Yeah.
and then it went back onto the market again and ended up selling to somebody else. But luckily, the seller that was selling the property didn't have anywhere to go. But in some cases, for example, if that seller had purchased a property and was really reliant on the settlement of that place, well, this is where it could be, really bad down the line
Yeah.
because it could have prolonged their purchase too. So it's always tricky and it doesn't happen often. And that's why preparing is super important, especially with your finance and your bank and your lenders. Just don't go over your limits, stay within your means. Sometimes you get caught up in an auction and the emotion of it all, but really just stay true to what you're allowed to sort of borrow up to, and you should be fine. Again, it happens one in 1,000 where a circumstance like this will arise, but it's not every day.
Interesting. When we look at auctions, we look at three price points. Okay. So we've got minimum price point that at a certain minimum level, we're going to get into the auction. Then we look at capable. So in other words, what would be comfortable and capable? So you've got your entry level, you've got your middle of the range, your capable, and then there's the absolute nth, top end. And if you cannot achieve the top end, that is the get out of the auction number. Now, I don't know if you had that
That's the push come
conversation.
to shove. That's the push come to shove price, right?
Yeah, that's the push come to shove, absolutely. But I think the big takeaway is, irrespective of whether you're going to auction or if you are just, putting a contract on a property, you'd be in exactly the same position because the minute you go to contract, you are on the hook. You've got to put that deposit in and you have to come up with the goods. You've got to come up with the finance. So if, for instance, the client that you mentioned lost his job, if it wasn't an auction, it would have been exactly the same for him. He would have lost that property.
Absolutely.
If he can't get the finance, he can't get the finance. However, I'm going to throw another little spanner in the works over here. If that ever happens, guys, come and speak to me because I've got a little blue card up my sleeve. There are
What is
many,
this?
there are hundreds and thousands of ways to purchase property, and you don't only need to use first tier lenders. So there are various other ways. And we've actually pulled this out of the bag where I had a property a couple of years ago that we were negotiating, and somebody else pipped me to the post. So they slipped their offer in. It was like $10,000 more. It was a $2.5 million property. And the seller they had both of our offers and they took their offer. Anyway, this guy couldn't come through with it. So I told the agent to dovetail our offer straight in at the same price, which he did. The other guy fell over and we took this. But the seller said no, he'd been stuffed around for so long. He wanted finance within 10 days. It was like pulling a rabbit out of the hat, and we made it
Wow,
happen. Okay. So
that's amazing.
yeah. So there are 101,000 different ways to finance your properties. If you get into that situation, speak to somebody in the know, somebody that can help you out. And Daniel, I'll tell you off air how we did that so that next time you can whisper into your buyers' ears. Tricks of the trade.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. We'll definitely have a chat about that some more. Absolutely.
It's very simple. It's just not who you know, it's what you know. So there are various other lenders that are prepared to do short-term finance. Very simple. So there's no secret to it. There you go, guys. The cat's out the bag. But it shouldn't happen. If there's a property that you know that you can't afford and you want to buy it, it really shouldn't happen that you can't. But that's very interesting. I remember you once told me a story about a guy that bid at an auction, won the auction, and then disappeared.
Ran for the hills.
What do you do in that situation?
Yeah, a couple of times actually, out of Melbourne, and I'm not sure if we touched on this the last time we chat, but in Melbourne you don't have to register as a bidder, so people can just rock up
Ah, that's right.
and roll in and bid. And then yeah, old mate decided that he wanted to be a part of this auction. He bid and he bid, and I announced it on the market. He kept bidding, and he was in competition with several others, and it got to a level where we were happily sold. And then one, two, three, sold happened. And then just as I'm commiserating the underbidders and saying, so sorry, we couldn't help you with this one, I beelined over to the buyer that bought it, and he was nowhere to be seen. I said to one of the agents, I said, "Hey, did you see the buyer? Where did he go? Oh, that guy, yeah, he went into his car and he took off." I'm like, "What? He bought the property. Did anyone register his details? Did anyone know who he is?" No, 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 no. So we couldn't really do much about it. Luckily, we happened to have the underbidder that missed out by a fraction and ended up selling it to them, I think, for $1,000 or $2,000 less.
Well,
It's strange, but it does happen. We don't recommend it because there's some legal ramifications behind that, especially if you've registered and you don't complete your purchase. Then that's when obviously it becomes a legal battle, and it's not nice. It's just it's not being a good human.
yeah.
Yeah, please don't bid on something unless you have full intentions to want to end up with it, because yeah, you could get into a bit of trouble. But it happened, Ish, and it did happen to me, and it's not a nice feeling because that vendor lost $1,000 or
Yeah.
$2,000,
Yeah.
and they had to sell it to somebody else. So
Well, I guess you've probably learned from that. Make sure that your team most certainly registers everybody, irrespective of which state you're doing the auctions in. In Queensland, it does work slightly differently, where you have to register and you have to, you basically got to give them a record of your full DNA before you can register at a bid
yeah.
in Queensland, which is not a bad thing. At least they know that they're not going to have any runners. I think things might have changed in Melbourne since then, though.
I think so. From talking to my old colleagues, they have a new process there, which it's still not, you don't need to legally register, but they do like to register their bidders because it shows commitment. And I think if you're a committed buyer and you've done your research, you've done your homework, you've, appeared a few times to the property, you've asked questions, you've done your due diligence, you've done building and pest inspections. I
Hmm.
guess you're highlighting that you want to buy the property, and therefore, if you do want to buy the property, you have to register, and it's just part of formality now. And they've been really good. So yeah, it's good to see.
Yeah, at least it tightens things up. I wanted to ask you, if a buyer has got their finance, but their finance is conditional, how
Mm,
do you regard that from an auctioneer point of view?
that's a good question. If the finance is still conditional, chances are they could probably bid, provided the broker is allowing them to do that. I guess the best thing is to be proactive before the auction. Work with the broker or lender to finalize everything as soon as possible. If they're not 100% ready, speak with the agent well in advance. Sometimes the seller is open to flexibility on things like a smaller deposit or a longer settlement. But here's the catch: once the gavel falls, those conversations are like over, right?
Yep.
The
Yep.
terms are locked in. I've seen buyers miss out, not because they couldn't afford the property, but because their finance wasn't organized in time, and preparation is everything. I always say if you're pre-approved from your bank or lender and it's conditional, find out what it's conditional upon. Sometimes you can go on and do these online little tools, and you can approve yourself, but I wouldn't recommend that. Because
Highly not recommendable, Daniel. No,
no, definitely
definitely
not.
not.
But some people have come up to us and say, "Look, I've completed some online tool, and it says that I'm good to go." I'm like, "But have you spoken to anyone? Have you gone to a bank or a lender or a broker?" Oh no, we haven't gone down that path yet. We thought we could buy the property first and then sort that out after, and put some conditions on the contract. I'm like, no, please don't do that.
Very risky. Very, very risky. Yeah.
And look, and first home buyers, especially, like they don't do this every day, and it's a lot of our world is about education, and not very often you buy a property every day, right? We happen to sell properties daily, but
Yeah.
people buy a home once in their life. They don't know everything.
And likewise, I mean, I think a lot of our listeners buy commercial properties for the first time after having bought maybe one or two residential properties. And it's very much the same but different. And again, finance, if you haven't got, if your finance is still conditional, again, it's particularly in commercial finance, there are different commercial lenders that will give you short-term finance. It's a little bit more expensive, but it does get you into the property. And it's an educated guess. So you really need to run your numbers and make sure that what you're doing is correct. And as Daniel says, get advice. Don't just do this by the seat of your pants. Speak to a proper broker, speak to professionals that know what they're doing. Because when that gravel falls, you're it, baby. You're on contract. That's the way it is.
Yeah.
So when you're speaking to your bidders, what kind of information do you want from the bidders? What helps you? What kind of information would be perfect that you'd be getting from your bidders?
When I was an agent selling, just a quick segue to this, for 20 odd years, I was listing and selling real estate. Only the last couple of years, I've really focused and drilled down on just being an auctioneer. But I was calling auctions for many of those years too, whilst I was running my own campaigns.
Mm.
I would always ask the questions of, hey, how long you've been looking? What are you comparing it to? Have you made offers on other properties before? And what happened? And talk me through it. But I've always asked the hard questions about, what budgets they're working with. Have they spoken to a bank or a lender? Because I wanted to find out what type of buyer they were, and what timeline they were looking at as well. Because they could have just started looking, haven't gone down the path of any lending options, and they're just having a look around. And then, we've spent 10 hours with them looking at several options, and then finding out that they actually can't borrow any money because,
Mm.
they don't work, or whatever the case may be. So I guess asking a lot of questions. What I want to find out, if what type of property they're looking for, and are they in a position that if they see something that they like, can they document an offer, and everything that goes with it, such as finance, which is the big one. I just want to make sure that we're not wasting each other's time. So, I just used to just get right into it.
Yeah.
And that all came down to the qualification process before they purchase. So, does that answer your question, Mitch?
Yeah, so ideally, what you're basically saying is before the auction happens, you'd like to know who all of those people in the room are. You'd like to know who they are, what finance they've got, if they're serious bidders, if they're not serious bidders. I mean, you must have quite a lot of people that just pitch up to auctions on the night that you've never spoken to and you've never seen before. Do
Well,
you have that?
yeah, absolutely, Mitch. And just to go back to, I guess, the auction that we had just done at the Glen Hotel here, and we had 25 that evening, and I did five on the Saturday, so that's where the 30 had come from.
Mm,
But the 25 that we did, there was over 250 people in the room, and I hadn't met any
wow.
one of them,
Wow.
right? And that was 25 auctions, all different agents under Ray White. Some had two or three listings, and they obviously knew who their buyers were because they've
Yeah.
obviously registered, they've gone through the property a few times, and then they've invited them to our event. But as an auctioneer, I'm on the lectern, and I just know how many registered bidders we have on each lot, so that way I know what I'm working with. But
Yeah.
I don't know anyone there. I may have, seen a handful of bidders on my way walking through the lectern, and I'm wishing them well, but I don't know what they're bidding on. So in events like that, I'm clueless, Mish.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely clueless. But I'm always looking for the paddle numbers, so I know who I'm playing with.
I was going to ask you when you're up there and you're looking, those panel numbers are coming up. You must be picking up a feeling from certain bidders that they're going after this type of property or they're that type of a bidder. The minute you say, okay, going once, going twice, somebody else puts their panel up and they like the last time, you know, slug in there. Do you find that?
Mish, I just thought of something. Sorry to cut you off. I've got this one buyer that has been circling around the south side of Brisbane, typically looking at properties between 800 and a million.
Yeah,
And this is kind of where our bread and butter stock is at the moment, and where we see a lot of activity or more bites at the cherry. And this one
yeah.
particular guy, he looks like Steven Seagal, long hair. He just stands out. I love this guy. He's a great lad, but he's followed me around quite a bit over the last, I don't know how many weeks. And he's never actually purchased anything, but he's registered on everything. He may have bid on a couple, I forgot. But the short and the long of it is that he goes, Dan, I hate buying off you because I can't. You're always you know, tipping everyone upside down and you don't throw the gavel down quick. Okay. Mate, if I was selling for you, would you want me to throw the gavel down quick? I mean, what's going on? When are we going to get a bid from you? When are you going to buy? When do you want your weekends back? Let's get you a property.
He's the kind of guy that's waiting for that golden needle in the golden haystack. He's waiting for a distressed property or a property that's desperate, that desperately needs to be sold. But guys, that's not the market right now.
No. And I said to him, I was in Browns Plains doing an auction for one of my guys here, and the property shot past the reserve. The reserve was 900. It got beyond a million. I think it was 1,007,000 before the gavel dropped. And I walked over to him because he registered but didn't bid. I said, mate, look, I know it's frustrating, but it's always going to be expensive and it's never the right time. But I can guarantee you this property sale today is going to be the new benchmark tomorrow. So those vendors that are thinking of coming to market are going to be using this particular sale right now as their next benchmark to demand more the following week. You get that, right? He's like, yeah, I know. And I said, so, and I said to him, I'll even show you my own personal example. I wanted to buy something like this in Browns Pains last year for 750, 800, and I thought that was expensive.
Hmm.
And look, fast forward to today, it's at a million. So
Yeah.
in another
Wow.
year's time, what's it going to be worth? Is it 1-1? Is it 1-2? Are we going to be priced out for something like this? Do we have to start looking at lesser options now with less accommodation or less land size? So we had a laugh in that moment, but I can tell like he's getting frustrated because he can't find anything. And that's kind of a lot of the market at the moment, Mish.
That's very interesting because this is a common conversation that I'm having with buyers right now, particularly right now. And I'm saying there is no new normal because what is normal today is not going to be normal next week. And the prices are just, you just can't peg a price at the moment. We had an auction a little while ago where the asking price was 3.1 million. That property went up to 3.7 million. It was just ludicrous. And with the way that the auction went and the auction went and the auction went, the seller eventually realized that he's got a lump of gold in his pocket, and he carried on pushing and pushing. Long story short, it never actually sold, and the seller has decided to keep the property because it really is a great property for whatever reasons, which is very unfortunate. But the buyers were sitting there, they were essentially buying their property at 6%. And when their property went right up to 5.3%, everybody, and that's how it went. The bids were getting higher and higher and higher. And what is the new normal? The buyer was asking me, Mish, is that normal? Well, at the moment, it is normal, you know. So, and that's why I say have your three prices, have your low entry price, so your low blow, have your what you're prepared to go to, and what your absolute top is. And that's the only way to approach not only an auction, but a freehold property, an open listing. I'm seeing exactly the same thing. There is no difference between auctions and open listing properties at the moment. It's exactly the same.
Very true.
Yeah. So just going back to your man in the crowd over there coming up to you, and he could potentially be calling you ruthless. So auctioneers have traditionally, or over the last, let's say, a couple of years, ruthless or real? Daniel, what do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as ruthless? I mean, bearing in mind, we know that you're working for the seller. Let's have some fun over here. Let's be honest about it. What do you think when you're up there? Ruthless, Daniel, or let's get real, guys?
Oh, you're right. I do work for the seller, and I guess my job is to secure the best possible price for them. That's the responsibility, and I take that to every auction. But ruthless, I don't know, Mish. I don't think that's my style. For me,
I don't think it's your style either, by the way, for the record.
I don't know. Do you reckon I'm ruthless, Mish? You've seen me in action.
I don't
I don't
think
know. I
you're
think I'm more
very,
jovial. I
yeah,
think I'm more jovial than anything.
I think you take it seriously. You know that you are working for the seller. And as you said, your function is to get the best possible price, but you have a lot of fun on the podium. You have a lot of fun with your audience at the same time. So you can be both, right?
I do. I love to have fun, and I think it's a one way that the crowd can sort of relax. It's
Yeah.
a big pressure cook environment, right? But
Mm.
for me, an auction is as much about energy and theatre as it is about numbers. I want the buyers to feel engaged. I want the crowd entertained, and I want the underbidders to walk away saying, "You know what? That was fair. It was exciting, and I'd happily bid with him again." Like this guy that the Steven Seagal, you know,
Bella.
doppelganger. He goes, if I ever had a property to sell, you've got my auction. Like, I want to lock you in. You're frustrating as hell to buy off because you're just so fair to everyone.
Yeah.
And I am. I don't just pigeonhole one buyer and say one, two, three sold because it's just gotten to the reserve.
Yeah.
I know when people are going to want to pay more, their body language will tell me that. And the conversations and the nudging of the ribs from the wife to say to the husband, hey, let's go up a few more because we don't want to have to go back.
I'm very interested in that. I love what you've just said there about the wife nudging the husband and the body language. What do you see when you're up there? I mean, you're reading the crowd. You must be seeing that and you're identifying one out of 200 over there where these people are keen. They're going to buy, they're going to buy, they're going to buy. Do you play with that? Do you use that, that information?
I don't know, I watch a lot of auctioneers, and some can get it wrong, maybe because they're under a bit of time pressure because they're going to need to get to the next one. But I allow enough gap to really drill down on getting the absolute best because
Mm.
I don't need to flurry off and be in a bit of a hurry and miss bids. I never miss a bid. In fact, last Sunday I did an auction over in Hillcrest. Reserve was 750,000. The first bid was 750,000. So on
Wow.
the market and selling. It took 55 minutes. Thankfully, it was my last auction of the day.
Yep.
I was working for a guy, Simon Howe, ran an exceptional campaign over at our Ray White Sunnybank office. Put on a flurry of bidders. I think it was 13 or 14 that had registered. It was a dilapidated corner property, but over 1,000 square meters on a Sunday, mind you, and it was a patch street.
Yep.
We get to auction, 7:50 opening start. It bypassed 900 at a rate of knots. I'm continuing with the auction. The sun was shining. It was beautiful. My vendors were under the carport watching me, and they're just literally standing behind me. And they're like, wow, we're already 150 grand more. It didn't stop there, Mish. It went to a million. And then when it got to a million, I shortened the increments down to $500.
Yeah.
And then I shortened the increments down to $100.
Gee.
And then I shortened the increment down to $10, which bought the
Wow.
property at the end. It
No
was
ways.
1,011,010, right?
No ways.
Now, legally above the reserve, I've got to take any currency AUD, all
Yeah.
right? Not
Yeah.
Bitcoin, just Australian dollar. But legally, if I'm on the market and I'm selling and they want to give me a dollar, I will have to take that dollar.
Yeah.
It's not ideal because I could be there for 4 months getting dollars, but
Mm.
I would have to take it. But the guy had literally said at 1,011,000, I think it was $1,009,000. I think the bidding was at. He like took off, went in, like about to get into his car, and then I've sort of ran over to say, "Hey, can I get you back in?" They're like, "Nah, we're finished. Our budget was a million." I said, "Would you give me anything?" He goes, "I'll give you $10." I go, "You know what? I'll take it. Would that mean you come back in?" He goes, "All right, let's try it." And he bloody bought the home-ish, $1,011,010. You wouldn't
Oh,
read about
wow.
it, but it did happen.
That is that is incredible. So that was obviously a live auction. That was on the property, right? You were under the carport.
Yes,
Have you ever had stuff like that happening when you in indoor auctions? I mean, what is better? What is better? Is it better to be at a live auction? We have spoken about this before, and obviously you can get bulk in the indoor auctions, but the live auction, by the sounds of things, there's a different type of energy to it.
there is. Well, the one that we had only recently with the 25, I mean, you can only imagine there's 150 seats, but there's 250 people packed
Wow.
into this room
Yes.
going from lot one through to 25. So the energy and in the market was just infectious.
Phew.
And I very rarely witnessed anything like that in the last sort of 6 to 12 months. It was quite phenomenal. And every property was so special and unique, and it had its own little tribe of people going toe to toe for them. So not only is every property special and unique, but every auction is as well. There's not one auction that is exactly the same after the 5,000 plus that I've ever called. But if
Yeah.
I had a preference, well, yeah, technically I'd love 20 in a row because I don't have to jump in my car and go from one to the other. I can just do them all in one. And I would encourage that if there is ever any properties or any auction events that you know that you can see or that are marketed, I would encourage you to go and see them, even if it's not just to buy, even if it's just to witness, because it could prepare you for how to combat this when you are ready to, take that next step and be a
Yeah.
participant.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. I mean, you did an auction on Saturday, you did the huge auction with 200 people, and then you did that one auction on Sunday. How come that one auction wasn't in the room and was live? Is that because of the seller wanted people on the property, or what determines in the room versus on the premise?
Great question. I guess sometimes vendors may have to feel comfortable
Mm,
with the idea because it can be quite polarizing to a vendor thinking, you know what, I don't want to do an auction as it is, and let alone I'm going to put my property in amongst 20.
yeah, right.
I guess the benefit by doing an in-room is that if you had your property in amongst the 20 or 25, and then you had a room filled to the rafters with investors that have missed out on lot number one, and then your property was lot number five, sometimes they don't want to leave that room empty-handed. And you might find that they picked up an extra bidder or two, And it's actually happened where people have emotionally missed out on one property,
And they've jumped into another one.
weren't intending on bidding on anything else, but
Yeah.
hey, they've flicked through the book and think, you know what, lot number five looks pretty much like what I'm after. Hang on, I'll go and quickly speak to that agent, see if I can register for it. And then they've gone and bid and ended up buying it.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
And
Yeah.
to some seasoned buyers, and sometimes they don't need to go through, especially in this market, Mish, where sometimes you don't even need to do the research. If the numbers are right and there's no emotion attached, if they're just dollars and cents,
Yeah.
and they've worked out that if I can pick it up at this particular price point and I'm getting this return on my dollar, hey, this is not a bad buy. I'll go for it. And there was probably two or three examples on that evening where people had picked up things or bid on things that had no intention initially to buy that. So as a seller, putting your property in amongst that could increase your chances of that one extra or two extra bidders per property could make all the difference of netting more money. So I think it is the most amazing and transparent way to sell your property,
Hmm.
especially if there's extra bidders going toe to toe for it. I particularly don't have a preference. I love the theatre of a good auction out in the street on a random Saturday, but
Thanks for
everyone's
your
doing that.
honesty.
You know? But in room, it's more you're more isolated, and at the advantage of a seller is you're capturing your audience before they go back out into the wild on the Saturday and looking at other options in the marketplace
Yeah.
with other agents, etc. So
It's interesting. Since we've been talking, I've had a totally different view on auctions. And thank you. I mean, I've learned a lot in these conversations that we have had from a buyer's point of view, from a buyer's agent point of view. I think this has been incredibly educational, and I'm hoping that the listeners out there are learning from, the ruthless or real auctioneers. Well, guys like Daniel, they're real. As far as I'm concerned, it makes all the difference. And we were talking earlier, I said to you that I've actually got an agent that I was speaking to earlier has got this property. It's quite a quirky property. And while we were talking about it, I said to her first thing, I said, this sounds like a property that should go to auction because she doesn't know how to value the property because it's got so many different dynamics. It really is quirky. And I said, look, if you want to know what the market is calling, then go to an auctioneer, take it to an auction. And I probably wouldn't have said that had we not had these kind of conversations about auctions. So Daniel, final words. It's really been interesting. I think we're going to have to look at other topics and have you back on the show at some time. And I'm sure there's a myriad of things that we can speak about. But one piece of advice that you'd give to every buyer heading into an auction.
I'm big on preparation, Mish. I think we've covered off on this last
Yes.
time, but
Yeah.
failure to prepare is preparing to fail. I've used this throughout my whole career. Ask questions. You never get in trouble for asking questions. You may get in trouble for making statements, but never
True.
asking questions. Be curious.
Absolutely.
The use of AI now and Google and the power of research and the internet and real estate, commercial realestate.com. You should be able to educate yourself quite quickly in this world that we live, but just prepare. Being a participant in auctions, whether you buy or seller, it's happening more and more frequently now. So you
Yes.
may have to get on board with it. Some
Mm.
really good properties are now heading to auction because the agent has suggested that that's going to be the best way forward for the seller because it's going to generate lots of competition. And if it's a really, really good property and a hot property and everyone wants it, well, you're going to have to, get amongst it at some point. I can tell you now we're moving very fast in the auction world in Queensland. We're still lagging behind, you know, in in New South Wales and in comparison to Victoria and New South Wales. But I think Queensland's now building a lot of steam. I'm trying my best to really, fly those flags and increase our auction share in this part of the world, and it's working. And I think give it another 5 years, and I think it'll be the preferred method of sale moving forward. So you've got nothing to fear. It happens weekly. In fact, it happens every single weekend. There are auctions, there's auctions even as close to Christmas. You're gonna have to bite bite the bullet at some point and give it a crack. If it means buying your dream home or dream property or the best investment decision of your life, if it's just a method of sale, don't stress. Ask questions and prepare. It's probably all I got, Mish. What do you
Ah,
think?
that is brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. This is powerful stuff, Daniel. Thank you again for joining us. I think this is incredibly educational, and it just gives the listeners, I think that other take on, having it from the horse's mouth, the auctioneer's mouth. There we go. So, to all our listeners, if you found this valuable, please share this with somebody thinking of buying, thinking of selling, thinking of going to auction, what they should know, the do's and don'ts. This has really been the property playbook of auctions, and this is to help you with your confidence, not to get stuck into the chaos, and allow you to grow and to learn and get those properties that are out there at the right, at the right prices, and it's all market relative. So I want to say thank you for joining us. And Daniel, thanks to you again for joining us.
No
Love
worries.
chatting to you, mate. This is absolute fun. We'll catch
Always
up
a
with
pleasure,
you
Mish.
soon. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on this fabulous show.